And so I'm going to start with a quote that I actually coined myself. And this quote is tied to a video that I saw that really kind of struck a chord for me. And so here's the quote, and then I'll play the video. The mind has the power to show you what you've been conditioned to see, even if it has to make it up. Okay, I'm going to read it again. The mind has the power to show you what you are conditioned to see, even if it has to make it up. Okay, and when I play the video, you will understand kind of where I'm coming from with this quote. So I'm going to play this right now, and we're going to see.
Experiment with a group of women,
yeah,
and they put scars on their faces, and
yeah,
they told these women that they're going into a job interview. They showed them the scars in the mirror. The women saw themselves with these scars, and as they led them out of the room, they said, we're just going to touch it up a little bit. And as they touched it up, they removed the scarring completely. So the women went into the job interview thinking that they are scarred, but actually being their normal selves. And the result of the experiment is that those women then came back reporting massively increased level of discrimination. Indeed, many of them came back with comments that the interviewer had made that they felt were referencing their facial disfigurement. And this is why I think this ideology of victimhood is so dangerous. An experiment with a group of women,
yeah.
And they put scars.
All right, so let me just recap what you just heard if you didn't hear it clearly. So basically, this is apparently an experiment that was done with a group of women who were going into a job interview, and they wanted to touch them up a little bit with some makeup. Actually, before that, they put scars on their face as a makeup, and they had them look in the mirror and see the scars on their faces. Yeah. And then just before they got into the interview room, they told them they were going to touch up the scar a little bit, but they basically took it all off. And when they did, so these women went into the interview thinking that they still had scars on their faces.
Yeah.
And so they go into the interview and they come out and they're interviewed afterwards. And apparently they reported massive levels of discrimination because of their scars. But the problem was they did not have any scars.
Yeah.
The person who interviewed them did not see any scars. They believed they had some scars. And that completely changed their perspective on how they were treated by the person who interviewed them. And so I was thinking about this and I thought, wow, what a powerful thing the mind is. And, and we've done some version of this experiment in our lives, right? We've done that where we've been told to count the number of red cars, and then suddenly you start seeing more red cars. And then the question you ask yourself is it because there are more red cars, or is it because I am counting red cars?
Yeah.
And this idea proliferates into every aspect of our lives. And it's very, very interesting because as someone who came here as an immigrant, who did not have a lot of the, I would say, mental baggage that a lot of people carry in America because of our history and our past, there are a lot of things that people point out to me and say, oh, that is happening over there. And I look at it and say, I don't see it. I just don't see it. And sometimes people think you're being insensitive or you're not truly grasping what is happening, but I just don't see it. Yeah. And that allows me to go through my day without that baggage kind of holding me back.
Yeah.
Because I don't go into a room expecting that someone is going to treat me a certain way. I don't go into any gathering expecting that I'm going to be looked on in some derogatory way that I cannot control. I just don't have that baggage. And so, Jenny, what are your thoughts on this and this particular experiment?
Well, like my first thought when I think about it is they chose a scar. And I mean, when you think of all of the things that women would hate, especially to have on their face, and the most thing that they would be most self-conscious about, it would be a scar. And I think there's lots of women who, have scars in other places and they've had to accept them, right? But they've had that time to accept it. So these women had scars placed on their face, but then told that they could cover them up, but that awareness is still there. So they're still aware that it's there, even if it
Actually,
doesn't
they
actually
didn't tell
exist.
them. So they
Oh,
didn't
they
actually tell them. They told them, hey, let's touch up the scar, but then they took it all off. So they didn't know
oh, so they
that
didn't
the
know at all.
scar, they had
Oh
no idea
gosh.
that the scar was gone,
Oh
right? They
yeah.
had no idea the
So,
scar was
but they
gone.
think it's there though. Like their
I know.
perception
And so
is,
in their mind,
they think it's there.
because they had seen it in the mirror,
Hmm.
they had created that perception that I have this scar. So everybody's watching me and is going
Yeah,
to judge me based on this scar. And so even though the scar was gone,
they
they
still
did
thought it
not
was
know
there.
it. And because they did not know it, their experience was completely changed
Yeah, yeah.
because of it.
Well, and I think that's what really it is, like what you were saying about perception. Like they had an awareness that it was there, even if even if it was removed, it was still in their minds there, correct? And
Exactly.
so they went into it thinking that probably even if it wasn't there, even if it was touched up and gone, like because they knew it was there, they thought everybody else knew. And I think that's
Exactly.
what everybody sometimes gets trapped in, is they think that because they see it a certain way that everyone else must think that way, or if they're self-conscious about something, someone will, or someone sees it, or everyone sees it. And the reality is, unless you tell someone or unless you're very vocal about it, no one really knows what's going on. They might have like, well, she seems really uncomfortable or he seems really uncomfortable, but I don't understand why. And I think that's, people have maybe an inkling that something might be up, but they're not. I mean, for the most part, people don't try to pry, or at least I don't try to pry. Like, if something was going on, like I'll maybe say, "Are you feeling okay? Like, is something going on?" But I don't. I wouldn't necessarily think someone was going at me. But then, yeah, if I was hyper aware and like thought that there was a scar on my face, I'd be a little nervous about like, are they going to think something happened to me? Like,
I know.
is this going to affect my interview? Like, is this going
Yeah.
to? And so there's lots of things that would be going through my head. But yeah, it would change my preparation going in, and it would change my mindset a bit. And
Now
I
I
don't know
want
if I'd
to take
like it.
it, I want to take it into kind of a little more serious, um,
Okay.
a little more serious realm,
Mhm.
because this is just a simple interview. But
Yeah.
imagine the people who are living their entire lives with this perspective,
Hmm.
right? And unfortunately, many of the people who have a perspective that the world is looking at them with
Hmm.
discrimination, or the world is looking at them with, a certain perspective that they have to fight against everywhere they go.
Yeah.
That baggage, that load, completely changes one, what opportunities a person avails themselves to.
Hmm.
But not only that, it changes how they approach the opportunity as well. And the question is, what is the process of telling people, if supposing they don't have access to that mirror where they
Hmm.
can confirm that, hey, I don't actually have that scar anymore?
Yeah.
How can we help people recognize that they can leave that baggage behind, right? And
Hmm.
that's the challenge, I think, of our generation, especially in America, if we're
Hmm.
going to move past some of the rhetoric around all sorts of things, race, gender,
Hmm.
sexual orientation, all those different things that today are huge issues in the, I would say,
Hmm.
public square. All
Hmm.
those things are because of perceptions that people have.
Yeah.
And the way I look at the world is, I understand that I can't control everything around me.
Yeah.
And because I can't control everything around me, then my goal is to control what I have in my power,
Hmm.
right? And so for me, I choose what the concept that I coined called willful positivity, which is the way I go into the world. So my mirror is to look at the world in the most positive light possible.
Yeah.
And so even if someone has a perspective of me that may be derogatory, I believe that I have the power to bring light into that situation in such a way that I could potentially turn that derogatory perspective to a positive one, right? And so I choose to be positive because there's a power in bringing that kind of positivity even into a negative situation. And
Yeah.
that is the kind of thing that I believe will change perspectives if we let it. And so once again, my quote was, the mind has the power to show you what you are conditioned to see, even if it has to make it up. And so the second part of this is, don't believe everything your mind thinks it sees, right?
Yeah.
Don't believe everything. Your mind can play tricks on you. And so I choose in many cases to give people and situations the benefit of the doubt. So if I come out of a situation where I feel like something was amiss, I don't understand why a person said a certain thing, and so on and so forth. First, I choose to look at it, like I said before, from a positive angle to say, is there something that I'm missing? Is there something that I don't understand? Right. And then I fill that gap of understanding with, I would say, love. Like fill it with love until it is proven wrong with extra evidence. Right. And so that's my approach. We should not allow our minds to focus on things that may not actually be there. And if they are there, they may not be to the extent that sometimes our mind will exaggerate it to be. It's kind of like when you're sick. When you're sick, your mind plays tricks on you. How many times have you been sick and then felt like you've forgotten how it feels to be well? Right? And you begin to feel like, I'm going to be this sick forever and nothing is going to change. And you feel miserable and your mind kind of closes out everything. And suddenly you forget all your experiences, knowing that, oh, this sickness is going to pass. But you completely forget it. And your mind becomes so focused on this sickness that you feel like it will never go away.
Yeah.
And then you wake up one day and you're better. Right? And so the mind can play tricks on us. And so it is incumbent upon us to not put everything, all the eggs of our emotions into the basket of what our mind is saying to us in one particular moment. There may be things that we don't see that we need to bring into perspective. And that then helps us understand what is going on a little better. What do you think?
So you asked earlier about like what could be solutions to that. And a couple of things popped up in my head. The first one would be that just like how those women saw scars, it's sometimes not easy to share scars. Sometimes the biggest decision is to even be vulnerable enough to be willing to share something and share something with something or someone who will listen. And that's sometimes the hard part of the person who's actually the friend or the family member. It's just to sit and listen and not necessarily say anything back, because what that person needs is just to let that out, right? But someone who has felt this for like a long time, in my mind, so something we like to tell like our children is that you actively have a choice to be miserable or you have a choice to change the way you're seeing it and to make it a more positive experience, like you said. And for kids that's kind of hard to understand, but like they'll like anything can make them miserable, like a friend saying no that they can't play is something miserable for them. So but they can actively choose to turn that situation that makes them miserable into something that they can make light. And I'm someone who knows that the more good I take in, the more good I can let out, right? Or the more I'm seeking to look for positive things or good things in my life, the more I can give to other people good. So if I'm constantly reflecting on what makes me miserable, then the outward response is always going to be, I'm probably going to make the people miserable around me. Like my
Exactly.
husband's probably going to be like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you like this? And then at the same time, I'd be like, why am I actually like this? And there have been moments like that in my life, like with, after having my third child, I had a little bit of postpartum depression, and I knew it wasn't me, and I didn't know how to cope with it. And at first I was like, well, I can handle it, I'll go through it, it's fine. But then at the same time, I had that little nagging feeling of, you can't go through things on your own like that. You have to actually, open up. And so I opened up to my husband, who's the closest person to me. And, shocker, he felt a lot of the same feelings I was. Like, he felt that, things were difficult. He didn't know how we were going to, power through. A lot of it was just, we were tired, 3 children in, we were just exhausted. But just having, someone else just sit and listen, and then just say, you know what, I feel exactly the same way, and I thought I was the only one. I think that opens up the doors to actually start healing those scars, because scars fade over time. And but you have to make the decision to let them. Like, if you're going to keep picking at them and letting them fester, then they're never going to actually heal, and you're always going to have them, and you're always going to think people see them, and then eventually you're going to push people away to the point that it's like you're not pleasant to be around anymore. And
Yeah.
I find that the people that'll hold on the longest are probably your family and your closest friends. But even they have a limit. Like, they have a limit of what they can handle and what they can't, because they're human too. And so I think the first step is to just open up, be willing to actually accept that part about you, and be willing to be vulnerable about it. And then to make the active choice to try to change your perspective, to try to be more positive, to look for the better things. And I think after a while, when you're starting to do that, you're not going to be focusing on the negative anymore. And when you start to be fueled with that good thing, you're going to start to crave it more. And so that's honestly what I think about that. I think if
All right.
people are looking for the good, they will receive the good. Like, just vice versa too. If they're looking for the bad, they're going to receive the bad.
All
So
right. Yeah, I think that sums it all up. I don't know if I can add any more to that. So thank you for sharing your thoughts there. So always think, doubt, doubt the things that your mind is telling you, and make sure that you have the evidence to support the things that you are deciding to allow into your mind.